All right, guys, what is going on? We are here for the first time in, I think, 5 years with the Fantasy Football League Power Rankings videos. I'm so excited to bring these back. There's been hype around this. I think this is something that really makes our league unique and great as we have me to do some power rankings. And in some cases, I'm going to have to give you guys a power spanking because some of you guys did a pretty bad job of drafting your team this year. Hey, listen, people have bad drafts sometimes, and unfortunately for you, I'm here to tell you about it, okay? And I'm not going to be super nice to some of you guys, but if you had wanted somebody nice to do these, you would have picked somebody else, okay? So let's take a look at the post-draft rankings, and just a couple of quick notes. I want to touch on some things here before I get deep into actually going into these teams, right? So number one, I'm not really looking at kicker and defense when I look at these rankings. So this ranking is going to kind of eliminate those. That's just super hard to project. A lot of it's random. And so it's not going to be something that I take a look at. So don't be surprised if I'm just not even mentioning it at all. When I look at your guys' benches, I'm going to be looking mostly at guys that I think have big upside to potentially become starters or potentially even become like superstars, right? I don't give a rat's ass about your tight end too, whether he can score, a touchdown the 1 week that you use him. I don't really care about the super safe wide receiver that can get you 8 to 10 points, when you need to put him in on a bye week. I don't care about that stuff. That stuff doesn't really interest me, so I'm not even going to talk about that either. Only focusing on big upside here. Another point, okay, obviously everybody in this league has guys that they are high on and guys that they don't like. I'm no different. There's going to be guys that you guys picked that you guys may be super in on that I'm just way out on, okay? So this isn't based on anything other than my projections and my opinion. So, if you can not get butthurt, that'd be fucking great, okay? So we take a look at those things. That's going to be kind of the key aspects that we're looking at when we're evaluating these teams. And then one final note, there's some teams that are pretty close in talent in our league. So we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of tie breaking. I'm going to pick the owners that I have faith in to manage the waiver wire, right? If you've been making the playoffs most years, you've been getting it done year in and year out, I'm going to tend to pick you over somebody that just hasn't really gotten it done, okay? Some of you have been not really working the waiver wire, maybe you've been, beating your dick like it owes you money instead of actually managing your fantasy football team, but that's going to be taken into account, okay? So if you're not a good manager and you don't have a good track record, expect to be punished. And there's also some team names in here that are fucking disastrous as well that I'm going to get into. One in particular that's got my attention. So with all that being covered, we're going to get right into the rankings. And frankly, this first team down here at the bottom is not going to be a surprise to anyone. We are talking about the auto draft warrior himself, Boston Monroe, and old Greg parentheses Olsen. Like we didn't know who the hell you were talking about. Didn't really need to put that in there. Not really a relevant or interesting team name. But let's go take a look at the big thing about this, which is just the roster. Okay, so when you look at this team, Christian McCaffrey, right? That is your big ticket guy. That is the guy that is going to determine your season in a large respect. I personally respect the fact that you picked McCaffrey, even though I personally wouldn't have done it. Just like I'm personally a big fan of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, but I respect if you're not, okay? It's whatever. But with McCaffrey, the guy gets injured constantly, but yet if he stays healthy this year, I don't think anybody would doubt he's going to be the number one back. Nobody has his upside of just catching 100-something passes and running for 1,300 yards. Nobody can do that except for him. So with that in mind, I respect that you drafted him. But let's take a look at the rest of your team. You took Allen in the second round, okay? Okay, so is Allen going to be far and away the number one quarterback? Okay, maybe. But where you took him in number two, if he's not, it's just a disaster. And it's really reflected in the rest of your team. Clyde Edwards-Helaire never even got to 20 points last year. There's more competition, not less, for Clyde. He's never seized control and taken the reins in Kansas City like we thought he would when they drafted him in the first round. I'm totally out on CEH. I think that whole backfield is a disaster. DJ Moore, okay, I love him as a wide receiver 2. I hate him as a wide receiver 1. He is not really a wide receiver 1. He's got a kind of a low ceiling. I think he's going to do well. He's very consistent. Perfect guy to have a wide receiver 2. But hey, when you draft Josh Allen at the number 2 spot in your draft, you don't get to have a great wide receiver 1. So maybe don't do that next time, okay? And then Elijah Moore, complete projection in a terrible offense. I like his talent. If he was on the Chargers or the Rams, I would have taken him 2 rounds higher than where you got him potentially. But he is on a bad offense, so we don't know what he's going to do. I obviously like Kittle. Unfortunately, if he gets hurt, you're going to have a hell of a time going on the waiver wire every week and trying to stream a bogus tight end. So definitely watch out for that. And then actually one of my guys that I think you did best, this might have been one of your auto picks, Christian Kirk. I think that he has a good chance to kind of ascend into being a pretty much like a wide receiver 2 type of guy at your flex. But everything else stinks. Your bench is very mediocre with the exception of James Robinson. Again, I think that was someone you might have auto-drafted. Don't know how, a lot of these guys, I don't even know whether to give you credit or to the computer, but regardless, he's on your roster. Robinson could do well. He is a proven player, so we'll see. But you are way down there on the list. Just not excited about this team at all. Okay, let's take a look at the next team. Now, this is going to be a team that may surprise people. This is a guy that consistently has done very well in our league. Has won championships. You know, he's a defending champion, but I just think this is a complete miss. Okay, and we're talking, of course, about the Ethiopian Desert Walkers. That's why I said it, the Ethiopian Desert Walkers. I'm saying that correctly. Okay, Gabo, so let's take fantasy football out of the equation for a sec. You spelt desert instead of desert, okay? Desert has 1 S. Desert has 2 S's. So when you name your team the Ethiopian Desert Walkers, it seems like you're talking about a bunch of Ethiopian guys hanging around the sand dunes eating bananas, Foster, and cheesecake, and not an actual football team. Now, I don't know what the point of even naming your team this was anyway. I don't know really what you're going for here, especially when you consider that Ethiopia has very little desert actually in it. In fact, it's mostly grasslands and tropical wetlands. So take that for what you will. Overall, this team name is a disaster. Gabo, you have to fucking fix this. This is a catastrophe. And after you fix that, let's try fixing some of this roster, right? I know that your shoulder's been bothering you because of all the reaching you were doing during the draft with all of these players. Wilson, I think he's kind of average in terms of the QBs. He doesn't run that much anymore. So I think he's going to be productive, but not spectacular. Nick Chubb, of course. Now, this is a guy that everybody was blasting me. You know, not everybody, but most people were blasting me for criticizing Chubb. You know, I like Chubb. I'm a huge believer in his talent. But this guy is in a horrible offense. And he has a lot of competition with Kareem Hunt. There's a lot of factors. I don't think he's going to score touchdowns like he's done in the past. We're talking about Jacoby Brissett. They're going to be struggling not to go 3 and out every drive, okay? This is just an offense that might average like 17, 18 points a game. I just don't see a lot of upside to take him as a first pick when you probably could have gotten him maybe if you had waited one more time. And maybe you don't, but you still don't reach for a guy like Chubb, in my opinion. I actually like Javonte, who you picked alongside Chubb because you had the back-to-back picks. I think Javonte is actually kind of sick. His talent is out of this world. But again, Melvin Gordon is that annoying guy that chips away fantasy-wise, so you have to watch out for that. This guy, as your wide receiver 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Look, if you look at the stats last year, this guy did absolutely nothing when DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson were healthy, okay? He did not burst onto the scene until those guys hurt and they had no one else to go to, okay? So that's where I'm very out on Brown, is when you add in DJ Chark to the offense. And Chark is not a spectacular player. He's not a guy that's going to go in and just haul in touchdowns left and right. But this guy is a proven NFL pass catcher that is not a complete disaster. And with Gardner Minshew, who, you know, is kind of a Goff type where he's not the best, most talented quarterback, but he can get a little bit of the job done. Chark did very well. So I'm not in on Amon-Ra St. Brown, certainly not as a wide receiver 1. Wide receiver 2, Hunter Renfrow. Very high floor guy, catches a ton of passes. I think he's actually poised to have a good year with McDaniels. Could become like a Wes Welker type, but that's still not going to be incredible fantasy production. But it's solid. Tyler Lockett, I think, might be the worst flex in the entire league. He is the number 2 option on what is possibly going to be the 32nd ranked pass offense in the National Football League. Totally out on Lockett. I think that was a mistake. I could see the Seahawks having multiple sub-200-yard passing games with Geno in there, and with Locke, it's not going to get too much better. He might put up some more stats, but these turnovers are going to be brutal. I'm just not in on Lockett. If Locke goes in, I am more sold on Lockett, but with Geno Smith, just no upside there. On your bench, and listen, George Pickens, I think there's a little bit too much competition there in Pittsburgh to be a true great guy this year. I think if you draft him next year or the year after that, I think you got a real solid player. Totally on board with his skill set. Just think it might be a year too early. And then Madison is the other guy that stands out to me on your bench. He is completely dependent on an injury to Dalvin Cook, but it usually happens at some point. So those weeks you'll have a top 20 to top 10 back. So congrats on that. I think it was a smart pick there, but I'm overall, I'm pretty down on this roster. And then next up, I hate to feel like that I'm down on all the muchachos in this league, but I actually have Pablo going in next. And Pablo, I respect your fantasy ownership. I respect your career history. You've done a good job. A lot of years, even though I think Jared Meyer made a fucking tax-deductible fantasy championship donation to you when he fucked up and let you into the playoffs at my expense. Don't forget about that, okay? You're very lucky that that happened. But that being said, let's talk about your roster. You got Stafford. Kind of like Wilson to me. He's a high-floor quarterback, but he's not going to be able to keep up with some of the running threats and some of the very, very top passers on these teams that are in shootouts with bad defenses. I think he's that next tier down, but I still like it. I still think it's fine. Alvin Kamara, RB1. Don't really need to explain why that's good. Okay, Zeke. Zeke is a tough one for me. Maybe he was injured last year, but I didn't like his look last year, and their offensive line is worse, and it wasn't great anyway. It wasn't great, especially at the end of the year. Now you've got Tyron Smith out, Lyle Collins. They have really questionable tackles. Their interior is not terrific, and Zeke, I don't know if he's good enough to overcome a lot of these obstacles that they're going to have. I think Dallas is going to kind of choke this year, and they're going to kind of blow it. I think the Eagles are really a lot better than they are. Zeke is a question mark for me, even though I totally think they're going to run him into the ground in spite of themselves, regardless of whether he actually does well. Deebo Samuel, I'm totally in on. Don't need to explain why he's good. Jerry Jeudy, this was the guy right here. This got me a little bit heated. I couldn't forgive this mistake. To me, when you drafted Jeudy ahead of Courtland Sutton, you lost me there, okay? I am totally in on Sutton over Jeudy. Jeudy has never proven anything in fantasy football. He has 3 touchdowns in his entire career. Courtland Sutton had a great fantasy year with shitty quarterbacks, and then if he hadn't gotten hurt last year, I think he would have taken another step. I think with Wilson, he's taken a big step. He's their most physically gifted receiver. I like Sutton, not Jeudy. So I'm going to have to get on your case for that. Zach Ertz is fine at tight end. I think he's fucking totally serviceable, and especially in the first 6 weeks could potentially even be better since when Hopkins went out last year, he saw a pretty good increase in production. Amari Cooper, I am so out on Cooper. That offense is just butter scraped over too much bread. There's not enough to go around in what's going to be, like I said, probably like a 14 to 17 points per game offense with Jacoby. Even when Deshaun Watson comes back, I'm still not convinced that Cooper's going to be good because this is still, at the end of the day, a run-first team. I just don't like Cooper this year. I'm sorry. I'm totally not on board with Cooper. Looking at your bench, Michael Thomas, upside, of course, is there, but I hate injury-prone players that also just they haven't done anything in years, and that's the category that he is really falling into here for me. So I have to be out on Michael Thomas. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, he's decent, and then James Cook. I'm out on the Bills' backfield, like I mentioned with Singletary. James Cook is getting hype. I'm not on board with Cook until I see it. Looking at the next team, this is a guy I think that's kind of used to being down here, used to being slept on. I think he actually tries to be at the bottom of these power rankings. That seems like the type of thing that he would do. Of course, we are talking about Character Concerns FC with Ajit here. So here's the thing, right? Is this Character Concerns FC or is this roster/talent concerns FC? I'm not really sure. I think it could easily be the latter. I'm looking at this team. Kirk Cousins, like I said, I think you got a good value for where Cousins is. He's been QB 11, I think, the last 2 years in most of the formats. And I think he's going to be better this year. So I think he's going to get inside the top 10. I like where you got him. ETN and David Montgomery. So ETN, I could see having a good year. But James Robinson's health and the fact that he's been so effective in the past makes me concerned that if ETN doesn't do some things well to begin the year, some things that sometimes rookies struggle with, if he messes up pass blocking, if he drops a couple passes, if he fumbles, there's no reason why they wouldn't just put Robinson directly in, a guy who doesn't do those things, a guy who's solid in all of those areas. David Montgomery, I mean, just, you don't have an unlimited number of years on the earth, so I don't know why you want to spend the few, good years that you do have watching the Bears offense with David Montgomery. I mean, I'd rather have Bernard Montgomery, the legendary British Empire general, than David Montgomery. And let's face it, we all know where the hell he is now. This is just not a good running back duo. Now, I will say this. I love your wide receivers. Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, so solid. Way in on those guys. And Hawkinson, I think, could break out this year. Definitely possible. He had a great start last year. Cordero Patterson. I'm actually one of these guys that's not in on Patterson. I think when these aging type of veterans have these kind of surprise breakout years, I just don't think that they normally sustain that to year two. For whatever reason, I just don't think that it's going to be great. I think they're going to have more options with Pitts probably going to get more targets. I think Drake London is going to do better. So I just don't know if Patterson's going to have the incredible efficiency that he had last year. And he didn't get a huge amount of volume. He got a decent amount, but he didn't get a huge amount of volume. So, that concerns me. I think Chris Olave is going to end up being your flex. I love Olave. He's an NFL-ready, polished receiver. And Jameis, he just loves to break out the crab legs and sling that baby down the field. And that's got Olave's name all over it, my guy. So I'm actually thinking that Olave, I look at this, I think he could easily break into your lineup as a flex. That's one thing I'm totally on board with. Ajit, you take a lot of risks, okay? You take some Mike Tyson level punches, but when you take those type of punches like Mike did, sometimes you run into Buster Douglas. And I think that last year you ran into Buster Douglas, and I'm concerned it's going to happen again here. I can see this team doing well, but I'm not really ready to put it higher. That's just my take on it. Hopefully you understand. All right, next up on the list, Big Beat Manifesto. Brendan, with your track record, I don't even want to know what that team name is about. But let's get into the fucking roster here, my guy. You've had a good run as a fantasy owner. You are typically pretty competitive. You're a passionate owner that cares, but I just don't love a lot of what you did with this draft. I got to be honest with you. Tom Brady, that's one guy I'm on board with. Tom Brady is like the song Hound Dog, never gets old. So totally good there. Joe Mixon, Zach Taylor is a conservative run-first coach. It's easy to forget that when you have an offense that kind of got the reputation last year as being a gunslinging, throw-heavy offense. It's not really the case. They are a run-heavy team for sure. They're a team that's going to have three really outstanding fantasy options with Mixon, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and maybe not a lot else. I think they just got those three guys. Josh Jacobs, this is my first concern, and it's nothing to do with Jacobs, okay? I love Jacobs. I have been a Jacobs drafter in the past. His talent, if he has ever been able to run behind a good offensive line, I would say that he would be an elite back, but he's never really been able to do that. And now you got McDaniels. This guy is the worst fucking owner, coach to have a running back in this offense. This guy, you just know he's going to put Zamir White in half the time for no fucking reason, even though he's not nearly as good. He just loves to play these random backs, just a ton of different guys in the mix. And I think this is a team that's not going to run the ball in the red zone as much as it did, or just in general. I think they're going to be passing more. Not loving Jacobs. Stephon Diggs. Don't need to explain why he's good. He's fucking solid. DK Metcalf. Again, I already explained this, but DK is a guy whose floor is the actual floor. There are going to be weeks probably where he fucking disappears, along with potentially the entire Seattle offense. This guy tries to run a route 20 yards down the field. You've got rookie tackles. You've got basically no studs on your line probably at all. I just don't love it. Geno Smith doesn't really throw well down the field. It's not a great fit. He scores touchdowns. He's going to have a couple weeks where he puts the ball in the end zone, but I just think his floor is super, super low. And then Dallas Goedert. I like Goddard. I think he's going to be a good option for Philly. But I don't love him as like a really, really high-end tight end. Lazard, I want to be in on Lazard, but this weird injury talk and the fact that he is just so bland overall, it's kind of personal bias on my part, but I just don't love Lazard at flex either. I think there's going to be other Packer options that emerged. And then you've just got a kind of a litany of nobodies on your bench, some washed-up running backs. Khalil Herbert might actually be good. But other than that, nobody on your bench really excites me at all. That's just my opinion, Brennan. Trying to take it too hard. Hey, I don't really hate any of these teams in this sort of middle ground ranking. I just don't want to put them higher because I've got a lot of questions. Moving on, we have Scoreless in Seattle with Chris Hasenheier. Chris, I hope you're doing well. I haven't seen you in a while. Hope everything's great with you. Let's break down this team. Honestly, there's a couple elements of this team I love and just some I'm just kind of out on. So let's talk about Aaron Rodgers, right? He is so solid. I think he's going to have a little bit of a dip in production, but nothing super serious. He's still a stud. I still love him as a good QB1. Johnny Taylor, don't need to fucking say anything about that. Devin Singletary, though, okay, like I said, out on the Bills' backfield. Devin Singletary has been there for a long time. He's never been able to separate himself from any of the other backs. Zach Moss, or now James Cook. I just don't know if he's got what it takes to break out and be a consistent starter for you. Keenan Allen and Marquise Brown, I do like both of those guys. Marquise Brown, he better be elite in the first 6 games of the year, because if he's not elite by the time Hopkins comes back, I'd be very concerned. He needs to be top dog. He needs to establish himself in that offense. Keenan Allen, I think, will. He's an older guy, but receivers can typically play to be a little bit older and still be effective, and Allen's skill set kind of fits that. Mark Andrews, I think he's going to take a dip. Most of his big games last year were with Tyler Huntley, not Lamar Jackson. And although he is good with Jackson, he is not the number 1 tight end with Jackson. I think he's actually going to potentially fall to like number 3 or 4. I could see a couple guys finishing ahead of him. Chase Edmonds, don't love the Miami backfield. I think he's maybe the most likely guy to break out, but I think they're going to use a lot of different running backs, and Edmonds, Arizona, never really looked that impressive to me, so that's where I am on that. Melvin Gordon III, I think, was a good pick by you. I think he has a lot of upside. You want the running back in the Broncos offense if Javonte goes down or if he has kind of a regression. Melvin is just a solid guy. Other than that, your bench is looking pretty so-so. Alec Pierce, just a flyer, really. He may have a couple of good weeks, but I don't think he's going to become a consistent starter at all. So, Chris, your team is not terrible, but I just have a hard time putting it ahead of some of these other teams. Now, moving on, number 8, wide receiver 1. Just 3 simple letters. We're talking, of course, about Leicester, who is trying to avoid the Leicester City absolute debacle that has occurred here to start the Premier League season. For all you soccer fans out there, I know you know what I'm talking about. Leicester, as far as your football outlook, I'm actually fairly high. I mean, 8 is just right in the middle of the pack. Again, these are all based on projections. Any of these guys can do well. When I look at Dak, I look at a guy who's just a proven player, proven to be a producer. I think Dallas is going to get worse. They may have to pass more. I don't see a huge drop off with Dak, even though they've lost some weapons. I still think the guy is, if he's good at one thing, it's putting up just empty numbers that mean nothing. So that helps. Leonard Fournette, I'm actually kind of down on, unfortunately. And I had Fournette last year. I think he's a decent player. But when I look at the injuries to that interior line where you have 3 basically backup players to start the year and that are going to be, I mean, God forbid one of those guys gets hurt. You're talking about 3rd string line. He needs a good offensive line. When he was in Jacksonville and their offensive line fell apart, he didn't just lose some carries or get benched. He got cut. They just got rid of him. They didn't want him around anymore. They put they told him to pack his things, pink slip time. I'm not really sure that the offensive line can sustain a really, really high-end rushing game. And I don't know if he's going to get the pass catch dump offs that he was getting last year. They got this white guy that's come in there now. His name is actually White. He is not a white guy. His name is I can't remember what his first name is, but he's a good, solid pass catcher from what we've been hearing. I think he could easily start eating into that. And that receiving from Fournette was so big for him. People forget how he was racking up points just by getting a lot of dump offs. So I think he's going to regress. But I think Elijah Mitchell, I think he's good. I think he might actually be your number 1 running back in terms of scoring. If he stays healthy, you want the 49ers backfield. It's gold because they run the ball all the time. Devontae, don't need to explain why he is good. Jalen Waddle is another guy I'm a little concerned. I think he's good, but I think he's going to take a dip. All those targets that he was getting at the end of the year, those are going to get siphoned off to Tyreek Hill. This is a team that's still going to want to run the ball in creative ways. They're going to use a lot of backs, but I still think there's going to be a lot of overall rushing attempts. And I just think Waddle is going to have a good but not great year. Still fine for a wide receiver too, though. Hayden Hurst is probably the worst fucking starting tight end in the league. You didn't prioritize tight end, totally fine, but you're not going to get bonus points for me on that. Flex Thielen, totally on board with that. Thielen rocks, touchdown machine. Kind of the weirdest big-time touchdown threat because he's not big at all, but he just always is so shifty and gets open down there. Claypool is the only guy on your bench that can do anything. You're carrying 3 fucking tight ends, which just continues to blow my mind. How do you have 3 tight ends and none of them are good, Lester? Come on. Get your shit together. Other than that, I like this team. Like I said, don't love it. Gallup, you got stashed away. I'll have to see Gallup do something before I actually believe it. And then we're going to the middle of the pack here. Here we go. This is a guy whose draft actually impressed me. This guy has been lambasted so many years. Every year it's the same story. Oh, this guy fucking sucked it up. He didn't do shit. His draft was awful. But Sean, this year, you went all in with coffee and Jesus, and I think it's working for you. I think you got the Lord on your side. I'm on board. You got me here as well, putting you at the very middle of the pack, which is respectable, is very respectable. When I look at this team, I look at the first 3 names on my list. Kyler Murray, totally good with that. Proven consistent fantasy performer with running upside. Austin Eckler, maybe the safest pick in that top tier range where I just don't see, he's never gotten an injury and that offense is so effective and is in the red zone constantly. I just think it's totally in the cards for him to have another solid year. And then James Conner. Now, a lot of people are like, what? James Conner? Why would you be high on him? Well, if you're in college, right, and you're a man and you're in nursing school, guess what? You don't need to be great. You just need to be okay because you got no competition. There's not going to be a lot of other dudes there. James Conner's the guy in nursing school on this Arizona backfield. There's no competition. He is fucking in there, dude. And I am totally on board with him as an RB2. If he went wide receiver heavy, I'd be okay with him as an RB1, honestly. But you've got 2 really solid backs. Love the backfield. Michael Pittman Jr. I like Pittman. Superhuman freak show from a physical standpoint. And Matt Ryan takes care of his number 1 guy usually. If you look at the historical nature of it, his number 1 guy is typically going to be a good fantasy player. So Take that into consideration. Gabe Davis, if you had drafted somebody other than Gabe Davis, you took Gabe Davis ahead of Allen Robinson, I believe. I would totally disagree with that. This is the guy that took you from maybe a top 5 spot to down here at 7. I could be totally wrong on this. Davis does have upside. He's in a great offense, but the fact that he's been there a while and besides one game hasn't really made a huge impact at all. If he hadn't had 4 touchdowns last year, he would have been drafted in the 12th round, maybe. So not loving it. And then Hunter Henry, I think this is a tight end that's kind of bound to regress. He's caught 9 touchdown passes last year. It's going to be hard for him to repeat that. So I'm a little down on Hunter Henry. And then Damian Harris. I personally prefer Ramondre. That's why I drafted him. But Damian Harris, I can't say I totally am out on it. Patriots love to run the ball. Everybody knows that. The only issue with the Patriots is you never know who is going to be doing the running, but they definitely love to run the ball. Obviously, when I look at your bench, it might be the best one. With Robert Woods and Treylon Burks, you basically have the Tennessee pass catching angle covered because one of those two guys is the most likely to break out of the Titans' passing game and just be an extremely effective option. DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to come back. You kind of need to toe the line, but if he comes back and he's elite, you could just really start going on a run where you win maybe 5 out of your last 7. And then Romeo Doubs. Totally okay with you taking a flyer on Romeo Doubs, considering if Allen Lazard's injury catches up with him, he misses a couple of weeks, and Rodgers starts getting in a groove with Doubs. Once he locks in on that guy, it's just like the frickin' NFC Championship game where he was only throwing to 2 guys, Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams. If you're not in the trust tree with Rodgers, you're fucked. If he gets in that tree early on in the season, massive potential there. So I like this team overall. Sean, a couple questions, but overall I'm totally on board. Congratulations. Moving on to number 6, I picked myself as a number 6 team. Okay, obviously I like my own team. If you wouldn't put your own team in the top 5 of the power rankings, then what the hell are you doing? You drafted them, so why wouldn't you believe that they're going to be good? I like my team. I know that the Dameon Pierce and Ramondre Stevenson is a scary concept. Ramondre Stevenson had 4 games of 20-plus points last year. If he scores 20-plus points at this point in the season with my receiving core, which I really like, my tight end is great, quarterback is good. If he gets 20 points, I'm going to beat whoever that team is, almost certainly, in my opinion. And Dameon Pierce has a lot of upside. He's unproven, but he has upside. Herbert, I think he's going to be number 2 or number 3 overall. He can run a little bit, and his arm is just insane. He can throw for 5,000 yards easily, if not more, maybe 40, 45 touchdowns. Sky's the limit. Justin Jefferson could have a Jerry Rice season this year. I firmly believe that. He is so talented and outlandishly freaky in terms of his skill set. I think he's the number 1 receiver. I picked him ahead of Cooper Kupp. Some people might think that was dumb. I don't want Ram trash on my team if I can help it, and I picked Jefferson instead. T. Higgins, a lot of negativity around T. What the hell for? The guy is a tall, fast, precise route runner with good hands that makes plays after the catch. He is the total package. I have drafted him every single year he's been in the NFL in one of my leagues, and he has never let me down. I don't think he's going to let me down this year. Kyle Pitts, don't need to explain why he's good. Juju, number 1 wide receiver in Kansas City. Please say less. That is a flex lock-in. That is, I think, Juju, when you look at it, his upside is one of the strongest flexes in the league. That's just my opinion. That's why I drafted him. So I put myself here at 10. When it comes to my bench, Josh Palmer, I'm looking at him as being a potential breakout star, especially if there's an injury anywhere in the passing game of the Chargers. He could elevate. Darrell Henderson, I'm not sold on Cam Akers. Guy looked like dog shit in the playoffs, fumbling and just not even really being effective at all. Darrell Henderson was effective last year when Akers was out. I could see something similar happening this year. Other than that, not a ton of noteworthy stuff going on my bench. But that's where I am. I'm at number 6. Last year I was probably down in the 10 to 14 range, and I ended up outscoring everybody by a couple hundred points. So is what it is. All right, let's move on. Now, this is a guy that really takes criticism well. He's been in the league. He's never been embroiled in any controversy or beef. He's always just really low key, and if you criticize him, he just really takes it in great stride. And that's Cam Lautenslager, of course, with the Monty's Python. I'm totally not worried about saying negative things and getting backlash because Cam's very understanding and he doesn't take it personally. So let's take a look at his roster. I really like 80% of this roster. I think is great. Dalvin, don't need to talk about why he's good. Aaron Jones, I'm a little lower on Jones because I'm high on Dylan. But I'm fine with Jones at RB2, definitely. I don't know if he's RB1 this year, but he might be. Mike Williams, this guy came in like a meteorite. He looked like he was going to be the meteorite from Armageddon and just blow everybody up after the first 6 games of the season. And then he kind of just dissipated in the atmosphere and became a cloud of dust by the end of the season. To do like a little science space meteor comparison there. That was kind of Mike Williams. But they paid him so much money, I have to believe they're going to get him the ball. So I like that pick. Deontay Johnson. There was a lot of negativity. The Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation could potentially be even better than it was last year because last year was one of the worst. Roethlisberger could not throw it deep. Turnover machine everywhere. Trubisky's not good. I'm not going to say that he is, but he can put up a little bit of stats and he can at least get the ball to these talented receivers, and he's never had even close to this much talent around him. So if he's going to do something, he's going to be this year. Dalton Schultz, if anybody kind of makes a surprise break into the top 5 of the tight end ranks, I think it's going to be him. I don't even know if that you guys would even consider that surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if he was top 5. And Kareem Hunt. If you've been a Nick Chubb fantasy owner, you know how annoying Kareem Hunt can be because he steals points consistently, and it's really annoying. He is a complete, point siphon, if you will, from a guy that is definitely, in my opinion, better than he is. But he is actually solid, and he can catch, and he can do everything you want. I like him as a flex play. When you compare him to Nick Chubb being a 15th overall pick and Kareem Hunt going way late in the draft, Hunt, to me, is a way better value pick than Chubb. Rashad Bateman on your bench gets me excited. He is actually potential to be moved in a trade by you or even insert into your lineup if you want to trade somebody else, because if he works out as the number 1 receiving in terms of wide receivers on Lamar Jackson's Baltimore Ravens offense, you could be getting a pretty good steal there. So I like his upside. So I've only had nice things to say. That's just because I don't want to criticize Cam right now. I'm still going to criticize Cam. Don't worry. You went with Trey Lance and nobody else. I really, I get pause, and I'm a 49ers fan who's been excited to see Lance. But he is going to struggle, as Mr. Benjamin would say, against some of these top-tier defenses. He's never seen a great defense yet in his career. The 2 games he played, Arizona, not a great defense. Houston, an atrocious defense. I totally believe that Lance will have some great games, but he's going to have some real stinkers, and you have nowhere to turn if he is done. You look at the waiver wire QBs, good God Almighty, which way do I steer? That is not a good group of guys to be looking at. So this team is really heavy in terms of running back, wide receiver. I like all that stuff, but Trey Lance gives me pause that he's your only guy on your team. So Cam, try not to take it too personally. And, the good news for you is if you want to blast me in the Snapchat, I'm not in there, so you can just really spread the cheeks and go right in if you want to. Not a big deal. All right, let's take a look at number 4. This guy quietly, I think, had one of the best drafts. And that's going to be JoJo with Super 8 here. I don't know what that team name is, but, it's solid. It's okay, I guess. I'm sure it means a lot to you. I look at this roster, and I just think that he got some pretty solid-ass value. Now, there's a couple question marks that I do have, but a couple of things I like. Now, when I look at his QB situation, every time you have Mahomes as your quarterback, you might have gotten the number 1 quarterback. And you can't say that about a lot of guys. His ceiling is to be the best at his position. And his floor is to be like the 5th best. So, absolutely can't argue with Mahomes at all. Najee Harris. Now, I don't think he's going to get the Big Ben noodle arm dump-off specials that he got last year where he has 9 catches for 42 yards because he's catching 2-yard dump-offs to Big Ben because he can't fucking move or throw down the field. I don't think he's going to get that type of volume. I still think he's going to be effective, though, so don't worry. I wouldn't expect him to just catch a million passes this year like he did last year. Rashad Penny. This ranking, you're number 4 because Rashad Penny is currently healthy. If he goes down, and for a lot of us, we're thinking it's not if, it's when, you're going to drop in the rankings probably. Just be prepared for that. But with Penny there, he's so efficient that he has never needed a lot of touches to get good results when he's been healthy. So you might get, if you're lucky, you might get 2 or 3 good weeks out of Penny and just get your season started off. So I'm not going to dump all over you for that. Just obviously be looking on the waiver wire for somebody when he goes down. A.J. Brown, I love as a wide receiver 1. High on him. I think Hurts is a good enough passer to get him down the field, and he is almost quarterback proof. With Ryan Tannehill, he still put up huge numbers, and is Hurts really that much worse of a thrower than Tannehill? A lot of people would argue no, he's not. Allen Robinson, so much negativity around Robinson. Don't know why. He has a bad year last year. I know because I picked Allen Robinson last year in this league, I believe. Or no, that was Galladay. Never mind. I had one of the bigger wide receiver busts, but not both. Allen Robinson last year, he had a big flop. Totally understand. But he has had a lot of success in the past with shitty quarterbacks. He's going to a quarterback now that is not shitty, one of the best. He absolutely is going to be the number 2 undisputed wide receiver in that offense to start the year in the Robert Woods role. Nobody is hating on Robert Woods. And Allen Robinson is bigger, faster, stronger than Robert Woods. So why would we expect a drop-off? This guy could be a fringe top 10 guy. I'm totally high on Robinson. Don't understand the negativity. And then Travis Kelce is just almost a shoo-in at the number 1 player at his position. Tony Pollard, this is where you kind of get shaky. Don't know how much he's going to get used. I like his explosion and burst, but the Cowboys are very stubborn. Jerry is very fucking in on Zeke, and he will cut off his nose despite his fucking face more than almost any guy I've ever seen in the National Football League. He will just run Zeke no matter how bad he is. He's going to keep doing it. So I don't know how much Pollard's going to get used. Garrett Wilson on your bench kind of intrigues me. He might get used a lot. He could break out. Talented guy, but you got questions about the offense. And then Raheem Mostert. Any week, he could get an 80-yard touchdown. That's the kind of player he is, but not going to expect a lot of volume from Raheem. So overall, I really like this team. JoJo, I think nobody was really hyping you up, but I'm here to say that I think you had a really good draft, and we'll see what happens. Moving on to the top 3, this is the cream of the crop. Ridley's mental health, our resident MAGA guy, Jake Smith. Jake made his draft great by just taking a lot of guys that were high on my draft board. There's no surprise that he's here because I found myself in the middle rounds eagerly anticipating getting to draft somebody only to have Jake take that very same player seconds later. So, I'm kind of pissed, Jake, but I have to give you the respect. You picked a lot of players that I liked. Joe Burrow could be top 10. Don't think he's going to be top 5. He's getting some top 5 hype. I don't think that's real. I think they run the ball a little too much for him to be super good with no running. But I think he's going to be very solid. I'm not concerned that he's going to be bad by any means. Saquon. Okay, so you're the guy that takes the Saquon bait. There's always a guy every year that does that. The guy is great. Anybody that's a University of Washington fan is still haunted by him in the Fiesta Bowl absolutely eviscerating the football team that had good defensive players that were drafted. And he just made them look like they were freaking fairies out there. He is sick. Now, can he stay healthy? And is their offensive line good? Both of those questions in the past couple of years have been no. I don't think their offensive line is that much better, but if he stays healthy, he may have the talent to kind of get over that. J.K. Dobbins, a lot of negativity around Dobbins. Maybe people think he's going to be injured. Last year was an anomaly. This team is going to go back to really running it a lot, and I think Dobbins is going to have a very good year. Again, doesn't have any competition. It's the mail-in nursing school principle. That's what I'm going to call it, and that's going to be Dobbins, another example. Kenyon Drake, that is fake news. Drake, I think, is one of the most overrated players in the league. I'm not a fan. So I think Dobbins all the way. You got Cooper Kupp at 7. You might be the only guy in the world that got Cooper Kupp all the way down at 7, because I'm one of the only people that thinks Jefferson is going to be better than Kupp. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kupp was better. I just have a personal preference, but you took advantage of that. Your wide receiver room is the best in the league in terms of depth. McLaurin, another guy that I think has undue concerns attached to him. He has played with Taylor Heineke, Kyle Allen, and Alex Smith at the end of his career after his horrible leg injury as his main 3 quarterbacks. And then people are bitching about Carson Wentz. Wentz is better than all 3 of those guys put together in terms of just throwing the ball. Taylor Heineke was the worst deep passing quarterback in the league last year. Carson Wentz can go deep. There's a vertical element to his game. Now, he's kind of a dumbass. He might not be a great teammate. What the hell does that have to do with fantasy? You're just worried about the wide receiver. So I'm totally on board with McLaurin. Kmet, solid. It's Mooney and Kmet and a bunch of nobodies swimming in the lake of anonymity over there in the Chicago Bears offense. So I'm on board with Kmet at tight end. Godwin is the best flex in the league if he stays healthy. By far the best flex in the league if he stays healthy. Brady loves the guy. And then you got Darnell Mooney as one guy that fell for no fucking reason. If Fields puts up 3,500 yards, that is a conservative estimate, very conservative estimate. Over 17 games, it's like 220, 230 yards per game. Who is going to get those yards? Darnell Mooney is getting those fucking yards, guys. I hate to break it to you, but it's not like the Bears offense is going to be passing for 130 yards a game. They're going to get something. Everybody does now. It's the new NFL. Get on board. Mooney should not have fallen. That's a mistake by all of you. I'm pointing the finger. Kenneth Walker is intriguing. I was high on him out of college, out of Michigan State. The game he had against Michigan, if you're not sold, if you didn't watch that game and you didn't see the tape of him, what he did, watch that tape. That is unbelievable. He is so skilled. I think he was the best running back actually out of the draft in terms of his pure actual running. So I think that he could easily take over if Rashad Penny gets hurt. And the Seahawks always want to run the football with Pete Carroll, even if you think it's the dumbest thing in the world, he is going to pound the football. So totally think that that's good. This team has a lot of depth. I would say this team is just so solid in so many ways. Even if Saquon goes down, Walker could easily come in and be a replacement for him. So I like Jake Smith's team a lot. Congratulations, Jake, on that. Moving on to number 2. This is a guy he's an owner that always gets it done. You can always put some faith into what he is about. He may have drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire number 1 overall, but his track record is undeniable. And that's Brandon Niblock with the Bills New. Somewhat controversial team name. I disagree, but hey, guess what? You can call your team whatever you want. When you look at this roster, it's just players that I like everywhere. Jalen Hurts, he is probably the second best runner in the league in terms of pure running. Kyler Murray is a good runner, but he's kind of a small guy, doesn't really have any power to his game, and he slides early. Hurts will fuck a guy up. He is a real tough competitor. I like that about Hurts. DeAndre Swift, the dump-off king. Jared Goff. How many running backs has this guy just dumped off to that have had great success in the passing game? It happened with Swift last year. I think it's going to happen again this year. And a Lions team that I think is going to be better. Sewell is going to get a little bit better at tackle because was a rookie last year. I think the other guys are real grinders down there in the trenches. I like the Lions to get maybe 3 or 4 wins better this year, and Swift's going to be a big part of that. Tony Gibson, you drafted this guy 2 weeks ago. I'm totally concerned, but with Brian Robinson out, unfortunately, this guy was thrust into basically being the only guy on the team that can really operate in this role. He had more fumbles than any player in the league last year, so keep an eye out for that, but that may not even matter. CeeDee Lamb, good football player, and the clear-cut number 1 option now that Amari Cooper is gone. Cortland Sutton, I talked about this before. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I don't know if this is true, but you must have just had one of those huge brain dopamine spike moments when you see Judy go off the board with Sutton right there, you must have just been thrilled. I would have been if I had been in your shoes, because I think Sutton's going to have a great year. Totally one of the better wide receiver twos in the league. And then Freiermuth. Let me ask you this, everybody out here that's watched football, if you ever had the misfortune of watching a Bears football game, how many times did you see Mitch Trubisky take a snap under center, play fake it to the running back, and then throw a 3-yard flat route to fucking Cole Kmet? How many times did you see that? And Matt Nagy's brilliant offense, that was one of their only plays that they fucking ran that they could actually complete the goddamn pass. And that's Freiermuth this year. He is the 3-yard flat route and dump off guy for Mitch Trubisky. I love that role. And Freiermuth is probably a better player than Kmet. So I like this pick with Freiermuth here. And then Breece Hall is the one guy I'm not really sold on your team. But there's a couple of guys on your bench that I'm excited about that kind of makes up for that. Reason I'm not high on Breece Hall has nothing to do with him necessarily, but the Jets had the lowest number of rushing attempts last year, and I think they're probably going to be along the same lines this year because their schedule is brutal and they're going to be behind. The guys that I like on your bench, well, really 3 guys. Derek Carr, I think, is maybe the best backup quarterback anybody's got. I think Carr is just totally, not that you're really going to have to use him. You might be able to trade him. You can trade him to Cam if Lance starts fucking up. I hope Cam, by the way, your plan is not to pick up Jimmy Garoppolo if Trey Lance gets hurt. Garoppolo is not a good fantasy quarterback. I've tried. But getting back on track here, Ayuk, there has been so much positive hype with Ayuk. And last year, that hype was coming from the media and us. This year, it's coming from the team. Every insider is agreeing that Ayuk is tearing it up in camp. He's not in the doghouse anymore with Shanahan. He is going to take the leap. And remember, at the end of last year, he was very fucking good. That touchdown he scored against the Bengals was one of the best touchdowns anybody scored last year. And that wasn't the only one. He is solid. The talent is fucking there. I think he could be a flex option. If Kittle or Deebo Samuel, God forbid, they get hurt, you better be plugging Ayuk into the offense immediately. And then London, big body receiver. A lot of people think that it's going to be London and Kyle Pitts. And that's basically it for the Falcons. I don't see why it's not going to be. And you're not relying on him to start right away, so you can afford to wait and see. And that's why you're the number 2 team, because I see depth on the bench as well as a very solid starting lineup. But the number 1 team, I think this was the guy that was getting the hype. Okay, we've got one father in this league. One guy that is a family man, and that's Nate Solly. And I say that because, I think you'd probably be the best father we currently got going, and you got the wife locked up. Nice. You got 1 ring. Let's go get another one, right, Nate? Get another one in this fantasy league, because that's what really fucking matters, okay? If you're watching this, Nate's wife, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that this league was more important than your marriage. But let's move on and apply some actual logic and analysis to your lineup. Lamar Jackson, let's take a look at this. The rushing upside's insane, and he is getting better as a passer every single year. Yeah, top 5 material for sure. Derrick Henry. So many guys are low on Derrick. The guy has a superhuman freak show. The rules don't apply to Derrick. He just runs through the rules and takes it to the fucking house. So not concerned. Cam Akers, I actually am concerned about. He is my least favorite player on your team, but if he does well, you're going to be really set at running back. Mike Evans. I'm not concerned about Godwin eating into targets from Evans, because Godwin has been eating into targets from Evans, and Evans has still been effective, extremely effective, one of the best receivers of his generation, and he has quietly gone on to basically have a Hall of Fame career. Brandon Cooks. Everybody was lambasting Cooks. Another guy, I don't get it. This guy has been a solid producer since he was in fucking Corvallis at Oregon State with the almighty Oregon State Beavers fucking football program. And then he comes into the NFL and goes to team after team and has 1,000-yard, 80-catch season after 1,000-yard, 80-catch season, and then nobody ever wants to draft him. Nate, I'm glad you drafted him, because you are a family man, and you know that you need to ground yourself with a solid foundation. And Brandon Cooks is a solid foundation for wide receiver too. Dawson Knox, okay? This guy's going to score a ton of touchdowns. I believe that completely. Very effective in the red zone on a high-scoring offense. Perfect guy to kind of get as a tight end later in the draft. Your flex is Devontae Smith currently, but the guy I'm actually excited about more than anybody else is A.J. Dillon. Think that you got a huge steal here. Everybody wanted to get Dillon. There's a reason for that. This guy is a red zone monster, and this is going to be a run-heavy Packers football team this year. Totally on board with Dillon. In fact, you really broke my heart when you drafted him because I wanted to get the guy to have instead of Ramondre. But I'm stuck with Ramondre. I'll cry about it later. But A.J. Dillon is solid. Totally on board with Dillon. The rest of your bench is pretty safe, but with your talent level, I don't know if you're going to be needing any of those guys to turn into stars. I really like your starting lineup a lot. So, Nate, congratulations. You were my number one team. It wasn't like you were the number one by a lot, but I felt that you separated yourself in this draft. So I would say congratulations to you. All right, that is going to wrap up the rankings. I hope this wasn't too long. Feedback is appreciated. Cam, if you want to blast me, go ahead and do that. I know that you thought you were probably going to be number 2 or number 1, but unfortunately, I only had you in the top 5. I know that's probably not good enough for you. I'm only doing this because everybody else wanted me to make fun of you, by the way. And I like to give the people what they want because, that's what show business is all about, right? That's going to conclude it, guys. I hope you all are very excited about your teams. It's a brand new fucking year. This is the best time of the year because anything can happen. All right, guys, I will catch you in the next week's rankings. Expect a little bit more production value next week. I'll have time to kind of prepare the rankings and stuff like that. So with that being said, adios, muchachos, and looking forward to the season.